Everyone, Ben Depot here, showing you how to use model groups and detail groups within your Revit projects. I started this tutorial off just with an apartment, one-bedroom apartment that you might be designing a larger complex that has repeatable units. And so to start off, we're just going to use this really basic, simple one-bedroom layout, and then we're going to use this as a repeatable element throughout. So just to kind of describe a few things here, we have walls, doors, windows, exterior walls, furniture, kitchen layout, and plumbing fixtures, so just a bathroom, and then some other miscellaneous things like closets and shelving and all that. So these are all 3D model elements, so they can all get grouped together within this one group here. So we'll go ahead and start to select everything within the screen. I will deselect our floor, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So now we have all of the components that we want repeated. So you see within this modify tab here, you'll see this button that says create group. So you'll click on that, and then you'll have the option to name the group. So I highly recommend whenever you're using groups, whether it's just you working on the project or if it's, like a larger team, you really should come up with your own naming standard and always enforce that as a practice that's going to be used in your office. The benefit of that is that with larger projects, larger teams, and even on smaller projects, it can get pretty unwieldy knowing what groups are to be used where and what the actual group is, especially if you have multiple groups that are slight variations of each other. It's really important that this stays organized and consistent. So I always like to do kind of just a high level description of it. So we'll just call this apartment, and then underscore, so that's apartment, just a very general thing. You could do, depending on what you're doing, essentially like type 1, or you could do 1 bed, 1 bath. So just really depending on what you're doing, and just be really consistent with like your nomenclature and your language that you're using. This really ends up helping the project when you're deep in like the construction document phase. It really helps keep things organized and tight. So once we have this, we'll click OK. There is an option to open a group editor. Let's go ahead and click that. If we didn't have this clicked, then we would kind of just be off in the regular Revit space. So click OK, and you'll see the group editor. It's where you can actually edit individual elements within the group. You'll see the background turn this tannish yellow color. So that's how you know you're in the group editor. And then you'll also see in the corner that you have this finish or cancel. So let's go ahead and hit cancel. So once we do that, we return to the regular Revit space. The difference you'll notice now is that you actually have one selection click to select everything that you put in the group. So if we select here, we have the group. If we come over, you'll notice that we are able to select the floor because we didn't include the floor. So now we have both. So that did not become a part of the group because it wasn't a part of our original selection. So just a few things with the group editor. If we click on the group again, click edit group. That's how you normally would typically enter the group editor once you have all of your groups made. We can then start to modify anything. So if we wanted to move this table, we can do that. Really just modify anything as if you would within a normal Revit space. There's also the option to add or select items. So if we click add here, you'll notice that all of your normal stuff is now grayed out, but then it's a little bit tough to tell here, but everything that's not within the group, so within this case, the floor, it actually then becomes black. The line becomes black. So if we were to click on this, and when you're in this mode because the cursor has a little plus next to it. You click on this, you'll notice that that is now gray, and that means it's a part of the group. So if we want to come out of that, just click escape on your keyboard, and now you'll notice that the floor is a part of that group. So if we come back in here, click edit group, say if we wanted to remove that floor again, we would click the button just underneath, remove from group, and you'll notice that your cursor now has a minus next to it. Zoom in, select the floor, and now you'll see it has turned gray because it's no longer within the group. One of the really good advantages of a model group, I'd say number one, it's all contained now. So say if we had a bunch of different units that we were working with within this building, you're actually containing each unit within one thing. So kind of makes it hard to actually modify part of an apartment when you're working on another one. So sort of just this one big mass. But the other thing is similar to those that have used AutoCAD, it's almost like a block. It's actually going to change all the different instances of that group. It'll make the same exact change. So let's say we had several of these units that we wanted. So let's do copy. That's this button here. You can also do the hotkey, copy it over to match up with our other wall just north of here. Then you'll notice we have 2 of these units. So a few things with that. So just to show you kind of how the model groups work, click edit again. And let's say that we wanted to move this downwards. And then, so we're done modifying this. You'll notice in this one, it hasn't moved. So that change won't take effect until we click finish. So now that we click finish, you'll notice that this table now moves south. This makes it really powerful if you have a significant amount of units or whatever your model group is. This is a great way to make sure that you have consistency throughout your project. One other issue that I've come across here when doing this, so you'll notice when we had the single wall here, so we have a wall on both sides containing the unit here. So if we undo that, you'll notice that if I click on this, this actually highlights blue along the edges, but the inside is white. So the reason that's happening is because there's two identical instances of that wall in the same exact spot. There's a few ways that you can deal with that. Probably the best way to do it is to actually remove one of the wall sides. So if we were to just hide this for a moment, so if you want to temporary hide, click on the glasses, hide elements. We do have a full video on this in our archives. So now that we have this isolated, let's go ahead, click edit group, click on that wall, the duplicate wall that we're gonna have, and just click delete. And now we will click finish and then come down back down to our glasses and reset temporary hide isolate. Now we'll notice that if we click on this wall, now we have that fill blue line. And if we were to move this temporarily, you'll notice that that wall is gone and there's no duplicate instances of that same object. The other way to do that same task, which it's sort of like an alternate way to do it, and there's definitely pluses and minuses to it. But if we're to reset everything, the alternative way to do this is that if we come over here and we find the duplicate item, we can tab through our selection. So right now it's selecting the group to the north. Now it's selecting the group to the south. We tab one more time. You'll notice that we can actually select the individual element. So that individual wall, we have a selection over. So if we click on that and we click delete, you'll notice this warning comes up that says group members have been excluded from this group instance. So essentially what that means is that we are making a single change to a group without making that change to all those instances of that same group. So we deleted that wall from this north model group, and you'll notice the south model group, it still has that wall. So if we're to separate this temporarily, you'll notice that this group no longer has that wall. This group has the wall. But if you hover over this, you'll notice this ghosted blue line. That essentially means that there's an element that's been excluded from the group. So if we click on this and say if we wanted that wall back in that group, there's a button up here that says restore all excluded. So what restore all excluded does is brings all of the elements that you've excluded from the group and brings it back into that group. This can be a little bit dangerous. For one, if you have multiple things excluded from the group and you want to get one element back, that's the only way to do it. So you'll end up getting all of those elements back. But the other thing is, you're really trying to be consistent. The real power of a model group is for consistency. So I would always recommend just trying to make it in a way that you're not having to exclude certain elements. And it can cause just, certain little glitches and things while you're modeling. So I'm going to undo all of that. Let's go ahead and remove this south wall such that we have a repeatable group here. So now we have this south wall open. So a really nice way to kind of just complete this unit now is if we go click on our wall category. So this is one of our standard walls. Go in, draw the wall like you would normally. And I believe this should be located here. So now you'll notice that we have this unit is now complete as it was before we deleted that. But the really nice things with model groups within Revit is that, especially with like walls and things like that, it actually joins it with the other walls in the group. So it actually looks like a consistent drawing. It looks like it's properly drafted, and it doesn't look like you're shoehorning something in. So now this is no longer, it's not a part of the group, but it is something within Revit. So now that we have all this, let's go ahead and start to play some of this out. Say we wanted one more of these, and then we get up to here and say that we're feeling like, all right, this is getting close to the building, but what if we want another unit type? Well, you can build out another unit the same way this one was built out, but then add it and modify, whatever components that you need. So let's say we wanted a 2-bedroom. And for the sake of time here, I went ahead and modeled this out. So really similar layout, kind of just added a primary suite with a bedroom, a private bathroom, and then a walk-in closet. So let's go ahead and match this up with the rest of our units. Now that we've aligned it with the other units here, similar to before with the other wall, it actually is joining the walls up model group to model group, even though they're different types of model groups. So this one, apartment underscore 1 bed, 1 bath. And then this one, apartment 2 bed BR. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, is the naming convention. So this one is 2 BR. This one is 1 bedroom / 1 bath. I would highly recommend trying to keep all of this within that same nomenclature. So, and this is really nitpicky, but when you get onto these much larger projects, I found that consistency is really key in making a good product and creating something that the whole team can work in. Being really clear, like say if another team member leaves, you're not trying to decode how they abbreviate things or anything like that. Anyway, so now that we have this row here, we have 3 1 bed, 1 bath, and then we have the single 2 bedroom, 2 bath. So let's say we wanted another half of this building. So we wanted this same cluster, but on the east side. So we could select all of these. Let's deselect that floor for the time being. And then let's copy that over. So what I want to do right now is kind of have this facade on the east side. So model groups, they're really easy to work with, really similar to any other element within Revit. So we can rotate. So rotate button is up here. Rotate, make sure you're rotating 180 degrees here. And then right now, this is a fairly large corridor. So it's a 30-foot corridor. So we probably want to lower that down to, I don't know, let's say 8 foot. Looks a little tight. Let's do 10 foot. So now we have, a fairly complex set of apartment units within this building, and it was rather quick to build out. So I would say just be really careful with things like, you'll notice this misalignment here. You'll just want to like clean up stuff like that. Make sure that when you're doing this translation, be really intentional about how you're doing the translation. So it's not something that you're just randomly throwing out there. It's something that's thoughtful and considered. A few things with this, we will need to complete this building. So there definitely needs to be some sort of exit to the outside or potentially some stairs, some other elements that are, completing the building. So now we have our standard parts. So now we have to start to fill out the rest of the needs of this building. So I did go ahead and model out some of that stuff. You'll notice here, now we have some of this stuff built out. So we actually have a stair in here that connects the building to another floor of the building or to the ground floor to exit out. Just a few things to show you within this. So I did create the stair as a model group. So what I ended up doing here was this stair is made up of the exterior wall and then kind of elbows in to attach to the exterior wall of this model group. And then the way that I closed the rest of the system was by actually just creating a portion here of the typical unit wall and just shortening it such that it fits within the stairwell. So you'll notice here at the south side here, I did add a few things. So these are added just in the regular Revit drafting space. So added a door, a wall enclosing the stairs, and then also, and this window. So let's say we have this built out. So the north side is looking like it's lacking a little bit, like we need to add those components. So let's zoom in on this stair, click on it, click edit group, and then using that same tool, this add tool at the top, go in and add our wall, our door, and our window. Click finish. Okay, you'll see this come up sometimes. Highlighted walls overlap. One of them may be ignored when Revit finds room. So this is essentially telling you have an overlap in a wall. So typically click expand, drop down for warning. Sometimes when you check them, it'll allow you to show, but you could probably find it later. So now if we come back to the north, you'll notice that we actually have this wall, the door, and the window. So now we can see there's some sort of error that happens when we copy this over. On the south side, if we look at the similar condition, looks like it's just having a hard time joining with that wall. So we can go in here, let's click edit group. Oh, okay, I see. So it actually is overlapping with this wall. So we'll just want to drag it to that face. And then a lot of the time it'll just clean it up. Sometimes it'll give you trouble and you kind of just have to work through it and figure out what's going on with it. Let's click finish. And now it's a normal cleaned up wall. Let's make sure that didn't modify this down here. Oh, so it did modify this. So, I see here. So this is sort of what I was saying previously. So with the clean modeling and making sure you're doing things accurately. So it looks like when I copied this over originally, I must have moved one of the instances such that it no longer is symmetrical and consistent with the rest of the building. So if we click on this, type in move, we can actually move this such that it's consistent with the other side. And now we'll notice that the wall is good on the north side and should be good. Yeah, Good on the south side. So now we have like somewhat convincing building. Obviously this needs a lot of work, but we're getting an idea of how we can start to create a building with repeatable components pretty quickly. So we're not having to individually create these each time. It's sort of you create it once and then you can multiply it across the building. So now that we have all these instances, I wanted to show you the power of doing things within groups. So if we come in here and let's say right now this window is centered on this room here. But let's say from an exterior elevation standpoint, that might look a little funny. So let's say we want to center it within this opening space. Right now, we'll just draw a line between here. I know this is not the fastest way to do this, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I like doing it this way. But anyways, click Edit Group, and then let's use our Align command. Align to our center line, and then we'll find the center line of our window. And then if we zoom out and we look at all of these across here, click Finish. You'll notice that this window move is now centered in all of these different options here. So again, just a really powerful way to kind of permutate that across your projects. It looks like I may have done that already for this type here. This didn't get moved when I did it right there. So if we were to move that, click Finish. So that move will only happen within that group. So this is the 2-bed, 2-bath. You notice that off-centered here, but our 1-bedroom, 1-bath is still centered. If we head towards the south side where we rotated that instance though, so this is also a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, you'll notice that our window is now offset. So I'll undo that, just cancel. So just to review a few other things that we had talked about, let's say if you wanted to do a different furniture layout in one of these units, that might be a good way or a good use case for excluding components. So you can go through, tab through to select the individual elements. And then now that we have those selected, click delete. You'll notice that all of the other units, they have still the furniture. This one is no longer contains them, but still has them ghosted in here. So that won't print or anything on your sheets or when you go to print a PDF, but it's sort of just there to allow you to gain that information back. So a few other tips for using model groups. So you can actually create a set of 2D components, so like a 2D detail group, and then attach it to a model group. So the instances where this would be useful, so let's say if you have a building section and then there's a repeated detail that you wanted to, just show a little bit of detail for it within your section, but you didn't actually want to model it. You can do this and then copy it to all the different groups here. In this case, in this instance, let's say we were creating a diagram for a client, just wanted to show, okay, where are all the 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and then where are all the 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So let's call it type 1 and type 2. You can start to do this in a smart way, just like we did with the 3D components. So if we come here, let's start by creating maybe just a text box. It says, let's just call them type 1 and type 2 for now. Let's center that up. And then let's copy this up to the 2-bedroom. And again, I always just love being consistent. Move this back just for sake of this exercise. We'll call this apartment type 2. So this is just a simple text box, 2D text box. It's not associated with the model group in any way. So let's say that we wanted to add this text, and then we also wanted to add a color box, sort of like a color fill, just to show the different units really clearly and visually. So we'll just keep it simple and do a filled region. Let's go ahead, and this is all the BIM Depot kind of standard template. This all comes preloaded. Let's click on this, and then let's just retrace our layout here. So now we have the outline of our unit. We'll do the checkbox. So now we have a green for our apartment 2. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing for our apartment type 1. So now we have a pink color fill for apartment type 1 and then a green color fill for type 2. So now you'll notice we only have this in the instances where we modeled it. But really what we want to do is have this same fill for all the different units here. So the way that we can then do this, if we click on the model group, click Edit Group, and then you'll notice the third button vertically here, it's called Attach Detail Group. So then we'll get our model group, we have our name, it's all locked in there. But Attach Detail Group, let's call it, click OK. And then now it's going to prompt you to add the different detail components that we've modeled. So we'll click on our text box. You'll notice once you click it, it goes gray. And then our filled region, click to kind of grayed out. And then once you're done, you can either choose to add more. Say if we accidentally added something, we can remove it. or we can simply just finish. And then now we're back in the model group editor. So you'll notice the 3D elements are used now. Just click finish. So now you'll notice that if we were to move this, say out here, that fill in the text box, it actually moved with it. So now that's really an attachment. It's a part of the model group, kind of moves with it, and they're tied together. You'll also notice that our other model groups did not receive that. And the reason for that is that we haven't attached that detail group to that model group yet. So if we wanted to add this to this group, you'll now notice that it says attach detail groups. So I was doing this previously, so I have it twice, but this is the one that we had just created. Type 1 fill, click OK. And notice that then populates in the exact correct location that it did with this one. So it is something that's relative to the location on the page when you add it to that model group, or attach it to that model group rather. If we select multiple of the same group type, you'll notice we still have the option to attach detail group. But if we add a different type of model group, it no longer allows us to attach to multiple. That's really because the detail group is specific to that model group. So it's something that has to be relative to the specific model group. Go ahead and do this. We'll attach it to all of them. Now you'll notice that our text and our fill kind of populates throughout. So we can do the same thing with this one. Now that we have all this done, again, it's pretty quick once you get the hang of it. This is a great thing to know. Let's say if you're showing a few different options to a client, this is really a great way to simply break it down for them and just show them not the nitty gritty of each unit and having them trying to decipher where a unit starts and stops. Great way to just show them this is that type. A few other kind of lessons that I've learned just using groups throughout. I always recommend a few things. So again, the naming convention is very important. I like to use unhosted elements as much as possible. So a lot of times, let's say sometimes you have counters that are hosted on a wall, or a lot of plumbing fixtures are hosted to walls. A lot of sinks, toilets, showers, they all oftentimes are attached, or wall cabinets also. If you can, try to avoid using those. And the reason I say that is because, and it doesn't always happen, I'm not exactly sure what triggers it, but sometimes it only allows you to move that model group then within the axis of that hosted element. So let's say if this toilet was hosted against this wall, sometimes Revit would only allow us to move it north-south and not east-west. And so that's why I always, if I have the opportunity to use an unhosted version of that, I will. I know that's not always possible, so it's not end all be all, but it's oftentimes is sort of just good practice. So another good practice that I've discovered over the years, so let's go ahead into a section view here. One of the things that I found is I don't like to, especially for walls and things that can be top and bottom constrained, I always like to do unconnected. So essentially if we were to copy this apartment vertically, so you can host it on different floors, but let's say if you have walls that have differing heights, or a slew of other things. Let's say if there's a top floor roof that is slightly different than your regular floors or your ground floor, I always like to just keep everything contained within that group onto one floor. I've had issues in the past where a model group gets really complex and then you try to copy it to another floor. It really just it bogs the group down and it makes it really difficult. So my recommendation, if you can, in your instance, do unconnected and then just manually type in your unconnected height. So this would be the underside of slab here. That way I found that it helps kind of just ease things on the model. The last thing that I wanted to discuss here is reflected ceiling plans and fill patterns. So let's say we have some ACT on the project. So ceiling, let's just do a sketch ceiling. So right now I have my demo hatch, so let's change this. I use this again as a part of the BIM Depot template, but it's for demo, so kind of nice to have the dash within your ACT. Otherwise, if you demo something or demo your ceiling, it actually won't show as dash. It'll still show the consistent solid lines, so that's what that is. Edit boundary, and let's put this to a weird dimension. So let's call it 14, 9.5. And then let's call this one 12 foot 3 point. So now we'll see, the reason I did that is just to kind of show the effect of this. So if we created a model group here, just of this ceiling, and then if we mirrored this, so mirror button's up here, so let's do draw axis. So this is definitely at least in my experience, have gotten better over the years. So doing this tutorial in Revit 2024, I've noticed in earlier versions it's not as good, but you'll notice something here. So it doesn't really get the fill patterns right. So obviously with something like a ceiling grid and even like say a brick pattern or something like that, locating a fill pattern correctly is really important. So you'll notice that a few of these. Okay, so it looks like the east-west actually ended up being correct, but the north-south changed. So it ever so slightly changed by less than an inch where this fill pattern is located north-south. And then, so it ever so slightly changed the location of this. And, with things like ACT, it's really important that that gets done right. I've also noticed that sometimes it messes other things up, like furniture, or if we had, say, our lighting placed within the ceiling in really specific locations. I've had times in the past in older versions of Revit where it really messed that up. It does look like this is getting better, but it's still not there. So just word of the wise, like use caution with stuff like this. Ways that I've dealt with this in the past, say if we do have a symmetrical space on a mirrored axis, I'll just leave the ceiling or whatever has that specific fill pattern out of the group. And then unfortunately, you just have to redo it, model them independently. If you found a different way that's more efficient or makes this work, please, by all means, let us know in the comments. I haven't found a way or been able to find a way on the internet, but would love to hear if somebody does have a good workaround on this. So the other component that I wanted to show here was a 2D detail group. So similar to the attached groups that we were doing before, but this is solely within a drafting view. And so it's only 2D components, but I wanted to show you some ways that you can kind of creatively use these to do your drawings. So right here, I have just an incredibly simple drawing of a wall section here. So let's say if we were just trying to draw a wall type or show the typical section of your wall, you could start off with something like this. So we just have our 2 layers of gypsum board, our insulation, and then our stud in the background here. How this can start to be useful as a model group. So let's say we wanted to show our head and a base in a different drawing. So you can go through, click create group, just call it one type 1. So now this is a part of a group. So let's say if we wanted to add another version, like I said, with the head and base. So let's just, for simplicity, copy this over. And then if we go to our annotate tab and then we start to draft in. So now we have our head here. So we have our slab. So let's say we want to add some sealant. We do have a family for this, but unfortunately it's not loaded within this project. So let's just say we'll do a really simple one. And then you can actually do, let's say, a detail group of this. I always prefer to do, if I were to create something like this, I normally would just make a family for it. But sometimes if it's a total one-off, I'll just create a detail group for it. So once we have that, let's say we also need a channel. Let's go into here. Let's do channel. So now we have a really typical, simple kind of header detail here. And then let's say we wanted to show the base detail. And for the sake of time here, we'll just quickly mirror this. So now we have the detail group here in 2 instances, but one has, head and detail. So one other thing here we actually might want to show is a So now we have like a really simple version of this wall section showing head and base, but then we also have just the typical not really determining top or bottom. So let's say we wanted to show that tool. This family is available on the website, bimdepot.com. It's super handy. The break line is always consistent, and then you can actually change it from single to double. So something with the regular default Revit one is actually pretty annoying, so I do not like to use it. So now we have 2, arguably 3 drawings here kind of based around this. So the power of this, now let's say if we add a layer of gypsum board or modify this in some way, add it here. Let's add 2 layers on both sides, and that's our default now. Now you'll notice that this is changed within this drawing. You will need to come back, and anything that kind of modifies the other drawing, you'll have to come back and fix that. But it really starts to kind of make some of these things a lot faster to work with, so we're not having to redraw this a bunch of different times. So that's really the conclusion of the model and detail groups. Like I said, if you have any recommendations on improving workflow here, please let us know. And any questions or comments, please let us know in the bottom, and we'll try to get back to you.